This afternoon, I'd like to look at Psalm 13. Psalm 13 is something that probably typifies our own lives. It begins in despair. He asks 5 questions of God, and then it continues with some deliberation before God, and then he delights in God. So I like to say about this psalm that this is a psalm from despair to delight. So let's look at this psalm for just a few minutes and see what God can say to our hearts about going from despair. Maybe that's how you feel today. Maybe you feel disheartened, discouraged, or maybe you're just questioning God's work in your life. Because the psalm starts with 5 questions towards God. And none of them are positive. It's a matter of the psalmist is struggling with his faith. And I'm sure we've all struggled with our faith. And he says, "How long, O Lord?" In other words, he must be waiting for God to answer some prayer. He has a burden or he has some issue that's going on in his life. And he says, "How long? How long, O Lord?" Haven't you ever felt that way? Like, where is God? How long? And then he goes on, "Will you forget me forever? Have you forgotten me? I'm your child. Where are you? How long have you forgotten me? How long will you hide your face from me?" Well, that is a very heart question, right from the heart. He's missing the enjoyment of God's presence. He feels that God is not there. Now we know that God is always with us, but he has lost the sense of God's presence. How long will you hide your face from me? Have you ever felt like God's face has been hidden from you? Well, the psalmist did. So don't think that's an unusual feeling. And then he goes on, "How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day?" He's filled with sorrow in his heart. He's filled with emptiness. He feels God is distant. And then he says, "How long shall my enemy be exalted over me?" David just felt like he was alone. There was nobody there. And so these first 2 verses are basically verses of what we would say gloom and doom. He is in despair. He doesn't feel like God's answering him. He feels like God has forgotten him. He doesn't feel like he has a good relationship with God. He feels like he's in sorrow and heart, and there's no joy coming down in his life, and his enemies seem to be exalting over him. So instead of questioning, now he starts to deliberate. Okay, we've seen his despair, but now he deliberates, and he says, "Consider and answer me, O Lord my God." He says, "I need you, Lord." He's petitioning God, I guess would be a better word than deliberation. He's saying, "God, I've asked you these questions. You know how I feel. I feel like you're distant from me. Please come and answer. Answer my prayer. Answer my heart." God does long to do that. And then he says, "Light up my eyes lest I sleep the sleep of death." Let me have confidence. Let me get away from this despair in my heart, and that I would find peace in you, Lord. And then he says, "Lest my enemies say I've prevailed over him, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken." So he's just basically telling God how he's feeling. He's feeling, I feel like I'm in darkness. My eyes need to see light. I'm in despair. I want to be encouraged. I want to hear from you. And he says, "Consider and answer me, O Lord." And then 5 and 6, the verses 5 and 6, we see the light coming. We've been in darkness with the psalmist. And it seems like, where is the light? And he's pleading for the light. In verses 5 and 6, we see the light is there. God does answer in his time and in his way. And he said, in spite of everything, he says, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love." Now let's just stop there. In spite of all his questioning, in spite of his despair, in spite of his seeming to be hopeless, what changes the whole psalm? Verse 5, "But But in spite of all my feelings, in spite of all that's going on around me, I have trusted in your steadfast love. And that's what you and I can do. We can look around us and we can see things with despair, but we can truly trust in the steadfast love of the Lord. He loves us with an everlasting love. And as a result of him making that decision, in spite of everything that seems to be going on around him, he says, I trust in your steadfast love. And then we know what happens. Then he says, my heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. Now it seems like in verse number 1, where is God dealing bountifully with him? But instead of looking inside his heart, instead of looking around him, the psalmist is now looking up and he's trusting in the steadfast love of the Lord. And he says, God really has dealt bountifully with me. He truly has, and I will sing a song. Verse 1, it seems like there never will be a song. But by the time we get to verse 6, there is a song and there is rejoicing. The psalmist has gone from despair to delight. And you and I can do the same journey that the psalmist did. Yes, there may be times of despair, but you know what? God understands, and we can do as the psalmist did. But I trusted in your steadfast love. And may you and I trust in the steadfast love of the Lord, who will take us from our despair and bring delight where we can sing unto the bountiful blessings that God has given unto us. So may you and I have a rich day today and just enjoying the steadfast love of the Lord.